Okay, here we have a 2002 Chevy Impala, 3.4 liter. Customers complaining of having to put new coolant in every day. They're losing coolant, however, they don't see any external leak. So basically, if you're losing coolant and it's not leaking outside the engine, it's going to be leaking inside the engine. One of the major problems with these engines are that the intake manifold gaskets fail. But in this case, we're also getting coolant going into the cylinders. And as indicated by the fact that it misfires with white smoke coming out the rear. The coolant has not mixed with the oil. Oil is still nice and black. And there. So a lot of people would think that it's not a blown head gasket, but the simple fact that they're losing coolant and the engine is misfiring with white smoke coming out the rear means it's a head gasket. So we're going to change the head gasket on this engine. This is the GM 3400. It's also in other cars like the Chevy Venture, the Pontiac Grand Am. This engine is also very similar as the 3.1 liter to 3100, like in the Malibus and the Chevy Luminas. So every step that we're covering today is going to apply to both engines. And at the beginning of this video, you'll see the list of vehicles in which this engine is in, like the Buick Rendezvous, the Chevy Venture I already mentioned, the Grand Am, the Chevy Impala, Chevy Malibu, some of the Equinoxes, but there's a complete list at the beginning of this video. So we're going to give a step-by-step approach on how to change the head gaskets on these engines. As well, we're going to be covering the intake manifold gaskets and the instructions on how to take off each individual component. The alternator, power steering pump, motor mounts, etc. So let's get started.
Alright, we have a GM 3.4, as you can see. And we're going to do the head gasket on it. And the first thing you got to do is take off these struts and these motor mounts. They're a bunch of 13,
13, 13, 13, 13, 13, 13, 13, 13, 13, 15.
And 15s, yeah.
Right here.
Next we got this bar in the back. Just pour 13 nuts. Once you get that guy off, set this in real quick. Once you get that guy off, out of the way, you do the water reservoir. These little tiny 10 nuts, I guess you can call them. And the hose attached on the bottom of it. Just pops right up. You get this little hose. Take that out. Set this aside. Okay, next we're gonna take off the serpentine belt. Attached right here. It's got a little 3/8 hole so you can stick a ratchet in there. You just push it back, pop the belt off, let it rest. Pull that out.
Next, you can take out the air box and the intake, the tube at least for the intake. Disconnect the mass airflow sensor, intake air temp sensor, this vacuum pipe right there. Actually, this guy just comes all the way up. These are always mounted, that's fine. Let's put them down somewhere. You have the clips here. Hose clamp right there. Let's get the throttle cables out of the way. 210 millimeter right here, and there's one more 10 at the bottom. We'll get that next after we get the air box out. Pull this guy. They don't really come very easy.
Tight fit.
Yeah, they are a very tight fit. And actually, if you rotate the engine forward by taking off the e-brake after you do the motor mounts, gives you a little bit more room. You see, without the engine mounts, you have room. You can pull the motor forward, pull the motor backwards. In this case, we're pulling it back to give us more room to take off the intake. So much easier. People fight with these a lot, and I feel like I'm fighting with it right now. There we go.
It's always a tight fit.
Yeah, cool. There. That gives us better access to the 10mm nut right here, holding on to the bottom of the throttle cable bracket. Brackets off. This one you push forward and it'll unclip. This one you just bring all the way around.
It's in that square at the end.
Yeah.
Better view.
There we go. Just from this angle, pull it out.
It's right out.
Actually, next is to remove the spark plug wires from the coil, and then we're going to be removing the 10mm nuts, bolts right here holding on the coil, and on the back of the coil bracket you'll feel two 13mm nuts holding the coil bracket on. We're going to have the two 10 bolts and the 13 nuts, just two of them, just like this, on the back of the coil bracket that holds on the coil. Time to pull up the coil. You have 3 clips right here. And there's one more on this side. Just pull up tab and it slips right up. These down here is where the nuts are on the coil. Now time for the alternator. I have a 13mm nut off of the battery cable, the alternator. We have a clip back here, 15mm bolt, 15mm bolt out of here. This one's shallow. Make sure this one goes in the right spot, because if you get another bolt, it'll hit the belt and it'll shave off the belt. And there's one more 15mm back here. This one does not have to come all the way out because it's the alternator is slotted for it. You see?
Gotta see right there.
Right here. The screwdriver, pry up the alternator there.
Loosen up the bushing in the front.
It slides out.
And there's the alternator.
You can put these bolts back in if you want, so you don't lose where they go. Next is going to be the alternator bracket. Also has a lifting eye. Take off these 3 15mm bolts right here and that one right there. So let's do that now. I'll loosen them up real quick. It goes just like that.
Both pieces will come off.
Both pieces will come off. You want to keep them together so you don't lose the orientation of them. Just place it down like that. Next you have this guy right here. 2 7mm screws that hold it in. Once you take this off, you can get to the bolt on the intake. gonna have to lose these screws.
They're unique to the car.
You'll see it's held on with a line right there into the intake. Just pop it out nice and gently. Disconnect it from here. Actually, you know what? You can just disconnect the vacuum line to the fuel pressure regulator.
Give you some more room.
Now one of these standard GM clips. Just pull the tab back, push it down. Keep these guys together. Safe place. Now we can get to taking off this connector. They're all gonna have the same connectors. This vacuum line. Just disconnect it. Tuck it over here. Now you have 10mm bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 13mm nut. Underneath that is a 13mm stud right there. We'll go ahead and do that now.
Right under there.
After you get those, you have this bracket, 13mm nut holding it on, and these two hose clamps. You pull the pop the hoses off, remove that 13mm nut, pull the bracket back just a little bit, you can get the intake up. Also, you have 13mm bolts on the EGR. There's one on, actually sorry, 10mm bolt. There's another one on this side. Let's go ahead and do that.
A lot of the wire clips are held on back to the cams as well.
This is the bracket for the alternator. Below it, another 13.
That's the actual bolt.
That's the actual bolt. And we can just keep these together. Sure not to drop stuff.
Yep.
Safe in a drawer. Next is going to be that 13mm nut on the inside.
So we can pull away the water hose. Cooling hose.
That one right there.
The bracket is slotted.
All these clips right here. You don't really need to mark these clips. There's really no way to mess them up. They won't go back on if it's in the wrong spot. This one right here. Evac purge solenoid. Mixed with the PCV. Held on by a 10mm nut. Let's bust that guy out real quick. Alright, 10mm bolt, sorry.
I think I'll forgive you.
Yeah. Don't know the difference between a nut and a bolt. Probably shouldn't be performing this job. All this stuff you can
All the wires out of the way.
tuck out of the way. These are the 210s on the EGR.
You can see there's a little gasket behind it.
If you'll notice, most of the tools or sockets that we use on these videos are deep. It just makes reaching so much easier.
Occasionally you need short, but not very often.
You need an extension for that one. 4-inch extension. Or 3, it's called. The other one. And I'm going to use the power ratchet just because it makes the job easier. If you don't have a power ratchet or power tools, I recommend getting them. They'll make your job so much easier.
When you're taking out the bolts, this gasket will fall. Just grab that before I'm done.
Save it before it falls. When you do the head gasket, anyway, you should have a gasket set. Should come with a new one. If you're trying to do the budget route, you can get away with just doing the head gasket and the intake manifold gaskets. Please make sure that you do the intake manifold gaskets, even though they're more expensive than the head gaskets on this car. They fail a lot.
They're very
if you have
important
a
on these.
failed intake manifold gasket on these engines, you'll end up blowing another head gasket, or both of them. These
Gotta do those little hoses. The hoses are so short, you're definitely gonna want to pull off that bracket. Not just because it's mounted to the intake.
Sometimes you have to spin the hoses.
Yeah. Give you a little extra room.
Just a little extra. Yeah.
Change position here.
There we go.
They're both just right under there.
I recommend getting these, a set of these from Harbor Freight. Makes grabbing hoses so much easier.
They're also slightly angled.
Yeah, they are.
They were great.
Crack them. Do that. Spin them.
Work smarter.
Yes, definitely. Spin them to make sure they're nice and loose.
Now you can just pull the. You can see the intake loose now, the plenum.
I can pull the intake up.
Pull some wires up. Intake out.
There we go.
You should have plenty of room to pull it out.
Then put it somewhere safe. Next.
These are the gaskets. Definitely want to get new ones of these.
Yeah, these are the intake plenum gaskets. These are very important as well because they tend to crack. Even the more important ones will be the ones we'll be showing you in a later video, or part of this video still. It's going to be the lower intake manifold gaskets right here. Next, it's going to be thermostat housing, this coolant pipe held on by the 8, and the exhaust pipe right here. Next, we're going to remove this this coolant pipe right here. It's held on by an 8mm. Also, take off that hose clamp right there. Remove the upper radiator hose. That one right there. Of course, you can use a standard on these radiator hoses, on the hose clamps, but in most cases they're 8mm, same size as what bolts on the battery in a lot of GM engines. This is usually really hard to pull up. Sometimes you have to fight with it, but in my case it actually ended up being pretty easy. This guy is also trying to fight. There we go. See, some curved jaw channel locks are usually best. Trying to loosen up the hose when they're larger than the other side.
Obviously, coolant will drain if there is any in the system.
We drained most of it. You might get some that spill. Not much though. This guy.
Once you have all that out of the way, you're free to.
Tuck this guy out of the way. Just held on with the rubber heater hose back there.
We usually just put it on the side.
Next is going to be the exhaust pipe, the cross pipe shroud. Held on by 4 10mm bolts. 1, 2, and there's 2 more on the opposite end.
There and there. You can see it. Get that off.
Now that the 410s are off, you can move this shroud. And that'll allow us to get to the 13mm nuts.
There's 3 on each side. 3 there.
There, and there. I definitely recommend putting some oil, some penetrant on the threads before you crack them free. They do tend to stick, do tend to break. So we are going to do that. If one breaks, you should be fine. I recommend swapping it out for a newer bolt or a new stud. But if you still are able to tighten it back up with just 2, then that's fine as well. It'll seal. And as predicted, even though I put the oil on, this one actually ended up gripping but backing out the stud. This one broke. That one came off nicely. On the back side, that one broke.
They can see it. Yeah.
Those 2 came out nicely. If you want to replace this one, you can just use a 13mm finish unscrewing that stud and use a bolt to go through it, or you can just order new studs. I just use a bolt. It's the same thing. All right. Next, remove this little splash guard right here. You have held on my 10s. Have a jack stand holding up this bracket and the jack. Never rely on just one by themselves. Go ahead and do these.
See all these 10s there. There's, I believe, 4 of them. 5 of them.
4, and 5. The reason why I take this off is because we need to get to,
sorry for the shaky count.
That 15mm bolt right there. That one right there.
Right.
It's at the, not that one in the middle of the AC compressor, the one at the bottom. We're going to remove that bolt and here, 2 bolts on the top of the AC compressor and that bolt. The reason why I remove the AC compressor is because this bracket is sandwiched between the AC compressor and the block. So the AC compressor has to be moved out of the way in order to get this off. So then we can get to the rest of the engine. Okay, the upper intake, the upper AC compressor bolts are off, or at least out. The lower one I loosen up about 5 or 6 turns, just enough to get the AC compressor loose to free up this bracket. Now there's a piece right here that the bracket fits around. It's actually the top of one of the head bolts. This is sometimes a real pain to pull up. Gotta pry it up. There we go. It looked like it won't come off, but if you wiggle it enough and pry it up, it'll come off. That's the head bolt I'm talking about. Next is going to be the valve covers. The valve covers are held on by 8mm bolts. Some people call them 5/16, but 8mm. 4 on each. And if you look at the back one, there's one that is actually somewhat difficult to get to. It's behind, right there. You see this?
Let's see if we can get in there.
It's that one, it's right there, but it's behind this stud. It has a hex top on it, but that always breaks. I use channel locks. And that'll get it nice and loose. Once the stud's out of the way, use a regular 8mm. Boom. 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 Disconnect this O2 sensor just to get that out of the way.
Got lots of room now.
Okay.
Yeah. Much easier to get to.
There we go. Got these guys.
8mm. Might have a couple drops of oil. Shouldn't be very much at all.
If you want to be careful taking these off, you can. We have new ones, so. Makes life a lot easier.
Basically, the same thing.
When taking these off, you'll notice that these valve covers are actually different. Don't put the wrong ones on when you reassemble. One has the PCV and the other one has the oil fill. If you put them on wrong, they will fit, but your real life gets a lot harder. Next is going to be the power steering pump. Power steering pump's fairly easy.
These holes in the pump itself.
There's three.
Or in the pulley.
3 bolts. Right here, you just stick a ratchet through the hole.
You can see one bolt on the other side.
And right there. There's no need to take off the power steering pump pulley. There's a tool to remove that, but there's really no need to. There's one bolt. There's only 3. If you end up taking out 4, send me a message and tell me how you did it.
Third one on the bottom. We'll watch those threads disappear right now. And that bolt.
Removing this isn't very fun, but it does need to be removed in order to get to the bolts on the intake, the lower intake off to the side.
Just like on this side, there's some 10s. There's one there, there's one right there. And there's the same on the other side.
Now you have to pull this up. It does get a little tricky. There's the fuel pressure test little valve right here, little cap. Actually, removing this gives you just enough space to pull the power steering pump and reservoir out. It's still going to be a pain.
Very tight fit.
It always is.
Removing that cap and a little bit of patience, you can easily pull it out.
Those are the bolts right there. Those are next. And you have 4 of the 10 millimeters up top. Don't need to remove the fuel rail or the fuel injectors. It'll all come up with it. So you got to remove that bolt, that one, and that one. Also these 2. And remove this engine coolant temp connector. You have another 10 right there. Another 10 behind there. You're going to remove this 10, and you're going to remove these fuel lines right here. Just going to undo them. And actually, let me get my tool and I'll show you how to do those.
Yep. So man, those are the 10s I mentioned earlier. Identical to those.
This tool right here,
There we go.
get from AutoZone, Harbor Freight, O'Reilly, wherever you see them, they got them. Goes on.
Pops in.
Push this in, push that forward, then pull it out. They're different sizes, so you can't mix them up. That's the big side. This is the little side. A little bit of gas is gonna fall. No smoking, please. There.
With that removed, you can pull off the intake completely. Okay.
Once you're ready to pull up the intake, or get to these bolts right here, using a curved gear wrench. This one's a Duralast from AutoZone. I love using the curve because it makes life easier. You're not gonna be able to get a socket in there for that 10. This makes it easier. Once you get all that done, you're not quite ready to pull up the intake yet. You'll have this pipe right here held on with a 13mm nut at the bottom. You'll feel it. You might not be able to see it. You can see the gear wrench works so much faster than the regular box end wrench, unless you're really quick.
Yeah.
Which I am not. I get the advantage of editing video.
And usually that one, you can just put a socket on it. It's very easy. Let's see. Same thing on that one.
Quite out yet.
Almost.
Yeah, you don't get too much swing on this. I mean, I'd get more swing dealing with taking off the fuel rail, but that's just a pain getting all those lined up again. Doing like this is so much easier.
Take it off. You have to undo this clip, but the rest of them should be done by the time you're here.
13mm nut I was talking about on the back end. It's gonna be hard to see, so you can just get the camera down on that first.
Oh, well, there it is, right there under this tab.
Yeah,
see it, it's kind of blurry, but with that one in the back.
That guy. All right, so we're gonna get that. You can get to it with the socket. You can get to it with the wrench.
Yeah, this one's
A lot of people don't.
your preference.
Yeah, I like to use the wrench. Does not have to come out all the way, it just needs to be loose. We're gonna push this heater hose line back. Use a standard. There's a lip on the hose line right here.
There's a
Right up here.
up on the hose.
Little lip. You can actually just
Get it
pry it
out,
back.
because this bracket is slotted.
Yes.
You can see.
Yes, it is. Now I'll have the intake up once I get the other 10mm on this side out.
And we'll move on to the push rods.
All the bolts are loose and or removed on the intake. The 4 up top, 2 on each side. Bracket holds it in. Next, we're going to pry it up. Let's get a good pry spot right here. Nice. And this side, fine. There we go. Now it's time for the magic to happen. Oh, one more line. This is to the cam position sensor.
Sure.
Don't want to mess that up. It's gonna pull. Oops. It's gonna pull straight up.
That V pattern, you have to be pretty straight.
Actually, that bolt's not completely loose yet.
Sometimes
There we go.
gotta double check the bolts. Other than that, should come up nicely. Put that in a safe place. These are the important intake gaskets we were talking about.
These are the ones that, see, it's rare that you ever take the intake manifold off and have the gaskets still good. It's always best to change them with new ones. As you can see, almost every single port is bad. This one's just crushed and melted. Bad. That one fell off. Bad. Just pieces just falling off. Better to change them. Next, push rods. They're on pretty tight, so I'm gonna loosen them up.
Definitely use a ratchet first.
these push rods are different lengths. Don't mix them up. The exhaust push rods are longer than the intake. I found that out years ago the hard way. I just put them in, thinking, oh, they're just like every other engine. They're the same. They're not. I'll take off a couple so you can see. The magic of video editing. These will magically be. Okay. These are all the same. You can just put these wherever.
Rocker arms. Totally fine.
However, the push rods are different lengths. Exhaust, intake. All right.
All right. See you in a minute.
Last two bolts before we start doing the head bolts will be these two 15mm nuts right there.
Can't really see that one, but it's there.
Yeah, just that one. I put my finger in oil. Let it sit there for a couple minutes.
Let it seep in.
And take that off. Next video is the head bolts.
All right. Next is the head bolts. This is here. I'm soaking up some of the oil, but it's 8 of them. 15s. Definitely use a 1/2-inch ratchet. Not all of them will crack. Outside, work your way in. And you will have to do this 13 so you can get the oil dipstick out. You can pull it up with the head, but it's a pain. I recommend just taking it out. Do partially loose, and then make them actually loose, and then really use the gun once they're all actually loose. Okay. A nice 1/2-inch gun. And I can't put a socket on them. There you go. Once you get all the nuts, the head might tilt back slightly. Might not. Don't worry if it does. You can see this one is right now. Heads up, we'll pull those out and pull the head up. Out of 13. Let me just grab that real quick. Like that. Sometimes it's kind of gets stuck in there. It's got an O-ring to hold it in. Just give it a little wiggle and it'll come right out, usually.
Sometimes you have to fight it.
Yeah.
Fight it a lot to get that dipstick out.
Sometimes it's quite. You're right. These, as you can see, they're different lengths. Short ones go next to the exhaust, long ones go inside, and the stud we talked about earlier is in the back corner. Other than that, it's pretty easy. Let's see. Short, long, long, long. And then the head.
I'll take those for you.
Oh, sure, thank you. The head will just pop right up. Nice and easy. Oh, get your wires caught. There we go, let's check this out.
All right, on the next video, after we remove the rear head, we'll show you how to check these heads. Okay, the head is off. Clean the spot. Just use a brand new razor. Just do a nice little scrape, nice and flat. Get the carbon off. So then you can use a straight edge. Orient tools, accurate to 1/1000 of an inch. Gonna lay it on the clean parts, one and the other. I'm looking for a gap. As you can see, this thing is straight. I wouldn't even bother trying to use the feeler gauge on this. If there was a gap, it would look like that in the middle. But no gap.
Nothing.
When the heads warp, they warp like this, or they'll twist. You can use it at an angle. I didn't clean the edges, the corners off yet, and you measure the other angle. Measure all three angles for the straightness of the head. Next is going to be the valves. I got some carb cleaner. I can just spray it into the exhaust. And if the exhaust wasn't sealing right, you'll be able to see it's seeping through. No seepage on the exhaust side. Let's turn this guy over and check the intake.
Dump out your excess.
Dump out the excess unless you want them all over your tools. Next is going to be the intake.
Ports are much easier to get to.
No seepage.
These are pretty
On
good,
any
yeah.
of the intake valve. The intake's the larger valves. Not bad. So we're going to take this head, get it resurfaced, and check the other head as well.
So now the heads are off, and we got to clean up the block just to make sure it's good. So get a brand new razor and scrape the old stuff off. You're probably not dealing with originals anymore, but the original gaskets were graphite, so a lot of it stays behind, so you need to scratch it off. Also, right here, this is very important. You got to scrape these off. This is where the intake part of the intake gasket goes, and you silicone it. It comes with silicone in the package, but you always got to clean these off.
Yeah,
very well.
That's what it looks like when you
peel
it off.
Yeah, this one's still dirty, but see, you can peel it off. Try not to get stuff in the motor, and you'll have to scrape that last bit after.
You also want to be sure not to lose. There are 2 alignment pins per head. They set just like that. Sometimes they'll come up with the head, sometimes they'll stay in the block, sometimes they'll stick with the gasket. Don't lose them.
I'm stuck with our gasket this time.
Okay, you got the new head gaskets here. Most of the times, if you get a Felpro head gasket, it will actually say this end up or this side up somewhere on the gasket. These do not, but just to let you know, the metal that connects the rings is the side up that you need. Tilt the metal between them. Side up.
Metal.
So there's a space between the metal here. That's facing down. That is side up. We're gonna get these heads on, and then we'll torque it down. Time to place the head in. We already changed the spark plugs on these heads, which are a lot easier to do with the head out than with the head in. Line up the stud for the rear exhaust onto the intake, onto the exhaust manifold.
Okay.
Just lay it there for now. The pin will kind of hold it in. As with the all head gasket set, it's always recommended to get new head bolts. We'll get that secure, then we'll go over the torque specifications.
Okay, now it's time to torque down the head. I already torqued down all the bolts to 44 degrees. You can use a digital torque wrench if you want. And this displays on there. It's pretty nice. Or the click type, doesn't really matter. Just 44 pounds all the way around, and then you have to do an additional 90 degrees 95 degrees. When you do it, you need to make this X pattern just so you cinch everything down nice and evenly. You do that on both sides. So 44 degrees, X pattern, and then 95 degrees, or 44 pounds, 95 degrees. So like a little over a right angle. And you'll be good. You'll feel it when you do the bolts. You can't really go much farther than that.
And you have the one stud. You'll notice that the head bolt set comes with the one stud right there. Make sure that goes there.
That's a mount for the bracket for the motor mount.
Okay. Okay. We have a bead of silicone here that provides us the seals for the lower intake manifold gasket. These gaskets actually they line up a specific way. You see these alignment pins, they go actually into the holes. There's really no way you can put them on wrong as long as they fit. Sometimes you'll have pieces of the old intake manifold gasket that are still stuck in the hole. You have to dig it out with a small screwdriver. And next we're going to be putting the push rods. If you notice, the push rods are, like I mentioned earlier, 2 separate lengths. Okay? The long ones, if you can't figure it out by now, are for the valves that are further away, the exhaust valves. Put them right on top of the lifters. These intake manifold gaskets, they have little hooks to keep them nice and steady. Long ones on the valves that's further away.
See, 3 and 3.
3 on that side, and there's going to be 3 on this side. Ones that are further away. And that one. We'll get the intake valve push rods shorter. There for the ones that are closer. Once these are all in, then we will do the rockers. Make sure you don't lose any of these. The squirrel finds it on the ground and it'll eat them and probably choke. Next, the rockers. They're all the same rockers. I'm just going to do one for right now. The cup for the push rod. Make sure these little grooves fit in to the groove there. It's better if you tighten up these by hand. You don't need to power tool with it. Some cars have them as 8mm, some cars have them as 10.
10 seems smarter.
10 is a lot easier to work with. Not too tight, not loose enough to get loose. You notice that it pushes the valve down, but as the pressure from this valve wanting to extend back up pushes the rocker, and the push rod pushes the lifter down, the lifter will compress. I'm going to do the rest of them now. All right, got the push rods and rockers. They're all tightened down, and time for the intake. Try to drop this intake down as straight as possible. There we go. No, that's right. That was right. Oh, it goes over.
Yeah.
Yeah, my bad. Buttoned up. We're gonna tighten up the 4 top bolts. Put the 2 on each side back in.
Gotta do
the 10mm.
Do the 4 top first.
Yeah.
For the side.
Next is going to be the valve covers. We have the 2 exhaust bolts being tightened up right now.
Yeah, don't mind me.
Don't mind him. 1 valve cover on, the 4/8. We have a new gasket, came with the head gasket set. If you don't, like I said, if you don't have the complete set, at least get the head gaskets and the intake manifold gaskets. You can reuse the old valve cover gaskets. I'm gonna go that one next. Valve covers are on. This tube, now, time for it to go on. Took off the old O-ring. This is a new O-ring now. It's going to slide right in. This is what's held on by that 13 nut in the back. Time to tighten up that 13 now. Okay, while he is tightening up those nuts from the exhaust cross pipe, I will be doing the 3 bolts to put this power steering pump back on. Basically, we're at the stage where everything is just a reverse order of what you did already. And don't forget to place the new gaskets if you have them. If not, you can use the old ones down for the intake plenum. It goes under the coil, of course. We got everything else put in. It's pretty much going to be the reverse order as what you took it off. We didn't feel the need to cover everything. But one thing that a lot of people have trouble with is getting this to line back up over there. As long as the car is in park on a level surface and with the e-brake off,
see,
you can actually
flat
pull the engine. Pull the engine, and you can get them. You can get them started. Put it over.
Yep.
Not too difficult.
You actually get a lot of play that way.
Get a lot of play. Yes. Once again.
Smooth out of the way here. All right.
Get the 15 bolt. Just getting them started. It's more important. And that's that. We'll be starting it up in a little bit. All right. Nice and smooth. Sometimes you do need to crank it for quite a while because the lifters are still stuck in the open position. Sometimes you need to build up some oil pressure to get them free flowing to allow the valves to close. But just keep cranking. As long as you did what we said, it'll work. Thank you very much.